The Claw Woman and the Enchanted Forest. Prologue. In a time beyond calendars and clocks, when lands were not divided by maps, and forests spoke to the sky, deep in the black earth of the Gromy land, a hand came to life. It was a hand like no other. It had 6 long, sinewy fingers, and on the back of its palm, where others wear skin, it bore a woman's face, with emerald green eyes, a thin nose, a mouth that could utter curses or chants, and sensitive ears that could hear even the most whispered thought. A strange being, a mixture of flesh and dark magic, created by the sorcery of Tenebros, the king of dread, and his ice queen, Narcola. They wanted a weapon that would sneak through silences, tear without sound, bring death without a trace. They called it the woman. Claw. She was raised in the darkness, among giant insects, 2-headed snakes and spiders that spun venomous webs. She learned to walk on 2 toes, then on all 4s. She learned to climb sharp rocks and swim in black lakes, in which even the stars dared not reflect themselves. She was perfect. But she had a flaw. Her heart was not filled only with shadows. Unbeknownst to Tenebros, Queen Seralindra, mistress of the Enchanted Forest, a being of light and balance, had slipped a secret sap into the core of her creation, the sap of justice. Thus, the Claw Woman would remember, in the most unexpected moments, something greater than fear, the truth. When the Claw Woman escaped from the Gromy land and stepped into the Enchanted Forest, the sky trembled slightly. It was the beginning of a battle that would decide the fate of 2 worlds, the world that destroys and the world that protects. This is her story. The story of a being born of darkness, who learned to love the light. Of a warrior without a family, who found her purpose. Of the Claw Woman, who was created to destroy, but chose to protect. And it is not a story for the faint of heart. It is a story for those who believe that the heart can conquer the claw. Chapter I. The Birth of the Claw Woman. In a time before time, when the world was silent and the shadows had not yet learned to fear the light, in the depths of the Gromy land, a land unspeakable and uninhabited by men, a tremor arose from the sleeping root of a black forest, where neither birds sang nor the wind dared to blow. There, at the foot of the everlasting mountains, in a nameless forest, took shape what would later be known in the legends whispered by the elders as the Claw Woman, who is neither man, nor beast, nor spirit, but a living palm, a wanderer between flesh and dream, between howl and silence. It is said that the Dark King and Queen Narcola, the Dark Masters of Gromy, called her to life not from the womb of a mother, but from the wrath of the earth and the breath of an ancient lie. They could not give birth to offspring, and out of pride and pain they demanded the powers of the underworld needed a perfect servant, one that would know no sleep, no mercy, no doubt. The dark gods of the drowned root heard their prayer and gave a command to the mud. From a cracked tree trunk, struck by lightning and wrapped in mold, a living splinter broke loose. It grew into a strange shape, extending into a hand with 6 fingers, each curved with a cold, animal grace. In the center of the palm appeared a woman's face, small and proportioned, with 2 green eyes that blinked rarely, a mouth that whispered even before it learned to speak, and a small, perfectly symmetrical nose. On the back of the hand, where other beings would have only skin, 2 human ears sat like 2 shells of living flesh, listening to everything. When she rose from the swamp, born of darkness and calling, the earth bled mud and black birds soared in chaotic flight. The underground gods retreated into the depths, frightened by their own creation. The Claw Woman had no neck, chest or back. She was a lone hand, capable of walking on 2 fingers that became legs, arching with agility through the soft foliage of the forest. When she wanted speed, she ran on all 4s, and when she hunted, she climbed tree trunks, steep cliffs or stone walls, as if gravity were only a forgotten rumor to her. She swam like a deep-sea animal, spiraling and silent, sinking and resurfacing like an unfulfilled thought. Her voice was that of a young woman, but never completely human. Each word had a strange echo, as if it had been spoken by several. Sometimes she laughed, and her laughter made sick flowers sprout in the forest that hid her. Tenebros, the Lord of Horror, and Narcola, the Queen with empty eyes, welcomed her into their palace of black stone with blood on the walls. Queen Narcola taught her the words, and King Tenebros gave her orders. But they were never sure if she obeyed them, or if she was just playing her part like an old actor in a lost play. When Narcola touched her, the Claw Woman looked at her with deep green eyes, like 2 pools of gentle venom. When Tenebros asked her to kill, she never asked, why, But sometimes she killed without being told. It was rumored among the wandering spirits of the forest that the claw woman spoke to shadows and the whispers of branches, and that on moonless nights she rested her head on the palm of her hand, wet muscle and dream. But what does a hand with a face dream of? What can a creature born without a heart, but with eyes that cry, hope for? A wandering old man named Hagren, who had once been a scribe in the court of a forgotten king, saw her one morning. He came back white-haired and tongue-tied. He carved these words on the bark of a beech tree. I saw the face that has no body. T looked at me, and its eyes was the whole world gathered in a tear. And that world howled. When children in the villages on the edge of Gromi got lost, their parents knew what had happened. Sometimes they found only small, strange tracks, like twisted bird claws. Other times they found nothing, only silence, and a trail on the trees, a wet stain, like a palm squeezed with old blood. But the claw woman was not just a beast. She had a memory. She remembered what a leaf was, what a shadow was, what the touch of a ray of sunlight through the forest was. She remembered another world, perhaps one she had not lived, but had always dreamed of, and the silence between the commandments. She walked alone among the trunks and listened to the song of insects, trying to understand the meaning of her existence. It is said that in the middle of the choked forest, where the trees grow one on top of the other until they suffocate each other, the claw woman carved a figure into the trunk of an oak tree. It was not the king, nor the queen, but an imperfect human body, made of wood carved with her fingertips. And under that body she wrote, in squirrel blood, "I was not chosen, I was called." Legend has it that that wooden body, one day, will rise, and when it rises, the claw woman will remember who she was, not a servant, not a weapon, but an ancient being, brought into the world by the desire of a mother who was not, by a story that has not yet been told. It was said. But until then, she remains in the service of the two monarchs of horror, wandering silently through the forest where no one dares to enter, because there, in the wet foliage, on the black branches, in the middle of the night, a hand with a face may appear, and if you see it, it's already too late. Chapter 2. The Call to the Stone Throne. Under the vaults of the black stone palace in the heart of Gromi, where the light never reaches fully and the air carries the scent of ancient spells, the royal throne sat in the silence of a grey morning, and the high chair, carved from obsidian with the shapes of snakes fused with human skulls. Queen Narcola rested her chin on her white palm, and her eyes, of a cruel emptiness, followed the approaching figure. The claw woman climbed the steps with a strange elegance, bent on two fingers that played the roll of legs, and two others, spread out to the sides, supported her like dry wings. The long sixth finger touched the marble pavement with a slow beat, like a forgotten mince. The female face in the palm looked ahead, serene and mute, and the ears on the back of her hand quivered with each rustling from the throne room. It was whispered among the shadows that you were seen beyond the shadow border. Queen Narcola spoke in a steamy voice, cold and dry. "You left the Gromi land without our will?" The claw woman stopped in front of the throne. The palm head bowed slightly, with a movement that was neither submission nor guilt. Then, from the palm mouth came a weak and melodious voice. "The wind carried me, I did not seek their world." She called me. A murmur passed through the ranks of the shadow servants who stood on either side of the hall. Tenebros, who had remained in the shadows until then, stepped towards the light. He was tall, dressed in a cloak of scales of an unknown creature, and his crown resembled a spider's web beaten with bones. "Have you crossed the border?" he asked shortly, his voice cracked like stone. "How?" The claw woman's green eyes moved slightly. She looked to her right, where a pillar was cracked by the root of a tree growing inside. Then she spoke. "I was at the edge of the silence, where the suffocated forest ends, and there, between two twin trees, I saw the crack." "What crack?" Narcola hissed. "A crack in the air, like a wound on the skin. There was no light, no darkness, just a vibration. And I smelled the people. Fear. Crying. Blood. That place was unguarded." Tenebros descended 2 steps. His pale face was tensed, a cold shiver ran through the hall. "The border between Gromi and the world of men is old. Built by spells since the time of the first names. Not even shadows pass there without our command. How did you manage it?" The claw woman stood on all fours, supporting herself like a beast defending her word. "The gate did not see me. Because I am not whole, I am the edge, I am the beginning of the end. I was not created to stand, I was created to feel. And the world of men felt me. Narcola stood up. Her black velvet robes floated, unseen by the wind. And what did you do beyond? Tell me everything. Who did you touch? What did you leave behind? I was a shadow. I did not speak, I did not kill. I crept through the leaves, under the floors. I watched a child who dreamed of disembodied hands, and an old man who wrote about me without knowing me. I touched a river, I smelled an apple. I only stayed a moment. But the moment was enough. Tenebros clenched his fist. The dark hall vibrated. You broke the covenant. You are our servant. You are not allowed to know desire. The claw woman was silent. Her green eyes closed for a moment. Then she said, Desire made me. And you created me from it. I cannot be held in chains of stone while the blood of the earth wants to flow further. You lie. Narcola roared. You are a slap in the face. A dream held in flesh. We gave you form, and we can take it away from you. Tenebros approached the creature. He spoke to it slowly, but with the weight of an ancient command. The border between Gromi and the world of men is no playground. It is the wall of the old commandments. Beyond is the world of the sun. This is the land of horror. If you have passed, others can too. If you have felt, they will dream too. We want you to know that you will be watched. Every step will be watched. In the world of men, said the claw woman, my name was spoken. A child said, Claw woman, and gave birth to me from his word. What is spoken can no longer be hidden. The border cracked in fear, not betrayal. For a moment, there was silence in the throne room, a deep, painful silence, in which even the whispers of the shadowy servants fell silent. Then Narcola, in a voice of cold fire, spoke. You will be bound to the border. We will place the mark of silence in your palm. You will feel the burn whenever you step beyond, and if you speak any human name, your dreams will bleed. Tenebros pulled out a long needle, made from the bone of a fallen angel. He walked towards the claw woman. She did not run. She didn't blink. She just spread her fingers wide, like an offering. The needle was stuck in the center of her palm, just below the chin of her face. No sound came from her mouth, but her green eyes moistened. A small tear fell to the floor, and where it fell, the stone cracked. See, Narcola, said Tenebros. She is made of another breath. She is not just ours. But as long as pain binds her, she will remain within the walls. Let her go, the queen commanded. And if she steps into their world again, let us follow her with fire. The claw woman turned and descended the steps with even steps. Her face was silent, but in those green eyes, something new had taken shape. Not anger, not sadness, but a question. And questions give birth to legends. Behind her, from the crack made by the tear, a blade of grass emerged. Green, beyond the stone. Chapter 3. The Shadow Root and the Call of the Varlok. After leaving the throne room, the claw woman wandered silently through the forests in the heart of the Gromi land. It was neither night nor day, just an endless shadow inhabited by nameless creatures. The trunks of the trees were black and twisted, and the branches seemed to whisper in forgotten languages. The air was thick as old cloth, and the smell of mold and old blood rose from the damp earth. Her path eventually led her to the primordial tree, the place where she had been born. That tree was not alive in the ordinary world sense. Its bark was made of dried leather, and its roots penetrated layers of memory and oblivion. From one of those roots, the claw woman had been drained, grown from the sap of horror born of wills, spells, and hatred. She sat at the foot of the cracked trunk. Her fingers dug into the whitish muscle, and the face in the palm turned to the sharp branches above. The pain burned her. The bony needle of Tenebros was stuck right in the core of her existence, where nothing could be hidden. With every moment, she felt how that needle poisoned her thoughts, how it suffocated her in its own silence. But the face in the palm did not see why it frowned. An unjust punishment. I, who was made to be the fong and the knife. To be locked in the roots? The claw woman was not the faithful servant that others saw. She had obeyed orders, but not out of obedience, but out of prudence. She felt no pity, she knew no forgiveness. There was only hunger in her heart, a hunger for blood, for noise, for chaos. She had been made from the cry of a dead mother, from the moment a man fears the darkness, from the cold shiver that runs down a child's spine when he thinks he is being watched. That was what she was, a whirlwind of cunning and murderous desire. All the while, The eyes of insects watched her, from above, from the shadows of the trees, from the cracks in the bark, from the eyes of iron-bodied spiders and the muscular wings of giant beetles. Everything was seen, everything was felt, and the one who felt was Varlok in the throne room. The Dark King sat again on his obsidian chair. With long fingers he beat rhythmically on the arm of the throne. Beside him, Queen Narcola stood silent, but her gaze was alive. The call had been made, and after a few moments a creature descended from the ceiling, carried by thousands of wings. Varlok, he looked like a skinny man, but his body was covered in a shell of wet black putty. Two long antennae protruded from his back, and his mouth was double, one human, speaking words, and one below, with centipede fangs. His eyes were a colony of eyes, like those of a giant fly, blinking chaotically. "You have called me, Lords of Dread," Varlok said in his voice of poisonous hiss. "What do you want from your servant?" Tenebros leaned forward. "The Claw Woman has been touched by the world of men. She has begun to lie. She has begun to dream. A being born to kill. And now she thinks." Varlok hissed, hissing, his face sneering. "Disgusting corruption." "A pursuit," Narcola said. "A watch without fail. Every step, every gesture, every blink, let us know. Send your unseen army. Every thought be tasted, every whisper be sipped." Varlok bowed. Her shining skin creaked with movement. "So be it. I will send the swarm with a purpose. I will make the spiders sow his shadow. The beetles drink his tracks. The creepers penetrate his dreams. And when he errs, when he steps again into the crack of the world, I will be there." Tenebros threw back his cloak and stood up. "May you know no rest, Varlok. She is not like you. You are silent, loyal, without dreams. She is rebellion. A grass that grows in the crack," Narcola added. "But we are fire. And we will burn her." "She will fear the rustle of my wings," Varlok said. "And when she lies down, she will taste my myopic ants on her tongue." The Queen smiled slightly. "Start, Varlok, it's surveillance time. The Claw Woman is dangerous, and a dream in the Gromy land is betrayal." Varlok turned, and his back opened in two, letting out the swarm. Thousands and thousands of insects with eyes of tar, with wings of dried scales, with long, thin legs like the hairs of death. The swarm climbed towards the vault, then spread out into the forests, into the earth, into the sky. The Claw Woman did not know that she had been chosen to be hunted. But deep in her mind, where not even the face in her palm could speak, another idea sprouted. If she could pass again, and this time she would stay? Chapter 4. Words from the Shell. Under the depths of the starless sky, the Gromy forest seemed like a huge body, motionless and full of black veins. The Claw Woman walked slowly, with hesitant steps, touching the ground with two of the fingers that once carried her swiftly, running like a beast on all fours. But now she was wounded not in the flesh, but in the silence between her thoughts. The bone needle, stuck deep into the flesh of her palm, just below her mouth, burned her incessantly. Every moment, when she breathed, that needle moved. When she spoke, it hurt. When she stepped, she felt a sting as if her very will was being pulled back into the earth that had birthed her. She could no longer run. She could no longer climb. Her long, blind fingers, once strong, now trembled. But in her mind, in that silent depth where neither the Dark King, nor the Narcola Queen, nor even the Varlok swarms could penetrate, there, a thought grew. "I cannot be read, I cannot be penetrated, I am unique, I am the doorless thought." This was how she had been created. Not like Varlok, whose loyalty came from the mouth of a witch who had bound him with 7 oaths. Not like the other servants, built of fear and obedience. The Claw Woman was an experiment, a force made to destroy. But even those who create weapons sometimes forget that a weapon, if it has eyes and a mind, can turn its point. Her limping walk carried her to the edge of a low forest, where the trees were sparser and the wind whistled through the bare branches. She sat down on a fallen trunk, tired. Her palm-covered mouth sighed, and her leather eyes closed for a moment. Around her, insects watched, spiders with wings of dead light, beetles hidden under black leaves, ants that walked unseen on the bark. But she did not feel them. She did not even suspect them. Then the wind stopped, and in that heavy stillness, something changed. The trunk of the tree in front of her swelled slightly. The bark lifted. as if something had scratched it from within. Then the words emerged, written in flesh-wooden, with trembling but clear letters. You are being hunted by Varlok, servant of Tenebros. Beware of the insects that are his servants, they see you. The claw woman immediately tensed her fingers. The gaze of her green eyes widened. The face in her palm remained motionless for a moment, then spoke slowly. Who writes on the bark? Who knows my steps and movements, but also my thoughts? She received no answer. The tree stopped pulsating. The wind stopped whispering. Everything seemed as before. But in that silence, for the first time in her existence, the claw woman felt fear. Not a fear of death, because she could not die like mortals, but the fear of being pursued without knowing. Varlok, she whispered. She knew his name, but she had never felt the need to fear him. He was just a servant, a shadow of a shadow. But what if he could see everything? What if his insects were watching her now? She raised her palm and looked at the wound where the bone had been stuck. It was still bleeding slightly. She remembered how the king had stuck it into her, cold, without a word, with a sharp look. This is the chain, she thought. That bone breaks my It breaks my will. She crouched down by the root of a tree and began to dig into the ground with her other fingers, digging slowly, as if searching for something old, forgotten. As she dug, her thoughts raced inside. If I could break the bone, if I could get out of Gromi without being seen, if I could get back to the human world. For her, the human world was not a target for revenge. Not now. Not way.It was a gateway to something else, a cruel, dangerous, but liberating freedom. There, no one knew her name and no one had restrained her. Only there could she kill without a chain. But now, the words in the bark had awakened her. If Varlok was following her, then every move could be seen. Every step could be betrayed. And yet, her thoughts could not be read. That was the key. She stopped digging and raised her palm to the tree trunk. Her gaze moved to the twisted branches. Who are you, the one who wrote to me? And from the trunk, like a breath, a tremor left. The letters changed slightly, scrawled again. I am one who was before you. Beware of the light in your eyes. The break is in the water. Search for the bridge. The claw woman shook her head. The words did not make complete sense, but they stuck in her mind like sweet thorns. The break is in the water. The bridge. She began to understand. There is another way. Another fissure between the worlds. Not the one guarded by the king and queen. Another, hidden, unseen, maybe even forgotten. But to get there she had to hide.To outwit Varlok and his swarm.To stop speaking aloud.To stop pausing to make a plan. She stood up again. It was no longer a wounded shadow. It was a silent snake preparing to bite. She looked around and, without saying anything, she disappeared into the branches. But far above, on a high branch, a beetle the size of a child's hand turned and began to vibrate its antennae slightly. And beyond the forest, in the throne room, Varlok opened his eyes and smiled. Chapter 5. The Light of the Eyes and the Search for Water. In the unwavering darkness of the Gromi land, the night was not a mere absence of light, but a living presence, a being that walked among the trees with heavy, silent breathing. The stars dared not to enter here, and the moon, if it ever made its way into the sky, was a sickly shadow, pale and weak. In this deep night, the claw woman emerged from her home of roots for the first time since she had been wounded by Tenebros' bone. She walked slowly, her long fingers almost trailing behind her, but the look in her green eyes was burning. The thought that had crossed her mind since the moment she had read those words in the bark had not left her. The breach is in the water. Seek the bridge. It was a message that was more like a riddle than a precise indication, but it was all she had, and for the first time in her existence, the fear of the unknown made its way into the soul of the claw woman. She, who had known no hesitation, who had been created to tear, to hunt, to cut and to crush, now walked like a wounded creature, haunted not only by the pain in her flesh, but also a strange expectation. She knew that she could not escape if she did not find that water and bridge, but she did not know where to look, and who had sent her the message either. In a moment of fatigue, when she leaned against the trunk of a whitish tree, something happened, and in the dense darkness, from her eyes, those green eyes like two poisoned leaves, a light ignited. Not a fire, not a flame, but a cold, living glimmer, like the rays of a dead Starred, a luminous vapor emerged from her irises and, as her gaze rotated around, the darkness seemed to accept her, to clothe her. Her body began to camouflage itself, becoming one with the darkness. In this strange state, the claw woman noticed something even stranger. The insects avoided the one who shone. The giant fireflies of Gromi were not friendly creatures, but they had a special light that the Varlok insects recognized and did not attack. The light in her eyes imitated that glow. Perhaps without knowing it, perhaps from the depths of the magic from which she had been formed, the claw woman had acquired a gift. At night, she could become one of them, a giant firefly, a creature of light and shadow. She flew for the first time, not with wings, but with a relief of body. Her fingers clenched into themselves and the entire palm drifted into the air like a vapor, floating among the branches. The pain in her bone was gone as long as it shone. She did not feel the wound as long as it was. Night, she could run. And as long as she could fly, she was free. And so the search for water began. The day was hiding again, and a second night, cold and merciless, covered the Gromi land. Under the dense shadows of the twisted trees, the claw woman flew among the branches, looking for a blink, a whisper, a spark that would show her the way. In her mind, she repeated those words. The break is in the water. Look for the bridge. Time did not flow the same in Gromi. There were no clocks, no real mornings, only cycles of fear and hunger. But in the third cycle of darkness, when the light in her eyes had become stronger and her body was moving confidently through the air, she heard a different sound, a shudder, a tremor, a deep vibration, coming from under the earth. She descended, camouflaged in her green glow, until she reached the edge of a precipice. From there, below, she could see a pale blue light, reflected from a sheen of water. A spring? A river? Or maybe a mirror of the world beyond? The claw woman approached the edge. A stone fell away from beneath her and fell with a hollow sound into the abyss. There was no splash. The water was not there just to flow. It was deep, silent, and alive. The claw woman descended. Around the spring, there were no leaves, no insects, no spiders. It seemed a place forgotten by Gromi, a crack between worlds. She stopped on a low rock and looked at the water. It was black, but shapes moved in the depths. Eyes? Dead stars? Answers. Then the light from her eyes reflected in the liquid mirror. And from that mirror something appeared, a bridge-shaped shadow, an arch of light that floated from one side of the water to the other. It was not a structure, it was not real, it was a living illusion, a bridge unseen only by burning eyes. This is the bridge, she whispered, her mouth in her palm. Here was the first sign that the message on the bark had not been a lie, that there were ways out, that the Gromi land was not a prison without a key. The claw woman looked around. The insects were not there. The light in her eyes hid it. Even Varlok, the one with 1,000 eyes and 1,000 ears, was blind to the ancient firefly that she now embodied. For the first time in her life, in that hidden place, a different kind of feeling arose in her. Not the desire to kill, not the hunger for blood, but happiness. The joy of flying, of not feeling the pain, of knowing that somewhere, in the world beyond the water, there might be an escape. Maybe a greater power. Maybe a change. But with it, in that moment, came a decision. Now that she could fly, now that she could burn, she was no longer a servant. She was a hidden force. And the next night, she would seek the break in the water, the true bridge, and the exit to the world of men. Chapter 6. The bridge, the pressure of water, and the release from bone. The night was deeper than ever in the Gromi land, like a black mist flowing slowly through the thick foliage. The claw woman, enveloped in the green light of her eyes, floated silently above the rocks, heading toward the shimmer of that strange spring, that eye of silent water from which the bridge had been born. The bridge was not made of stone, nor of wood. It was made of strands of tight water, woven between pillars of some unknown material, perhaps tight roots, perhaps living bones. It seemed as if the whole place had been woven by an ancient mind, older than Gromi himself. When she stepped onto the bridge, the claw woman felt the entire structure vibrate under her weight, as if it recognized her. The bridge opened only to those born of Gromi, only to those created from rot, hatred, and dark spells. And she was one of them. For now. She was approaching the middle of the deck when a flash of light emerged from the spring. The water from the depths rose in the form of a wall, like a translucent curtain, that separated the two worlds, Gromi and the other, which no creature of horror had been allowed to see up close. In the middle of that wall of water, a crack could be seen, a vertical crack, like a wound, an exit passage. The claw woman quickened her pace, and her toes scraped on the deck. But then, something appeared in her path. On the twisted trunk of a tree that had grown out of the bridge pillar, a round bark appeared, on which appeared, as if burned with live fire, the following message. Remove the bone of Tenebros with the help of water pressure created by the water passing through the pillars on which the bridge is created. The claw woman stopped. The bone. The pain in palm and between her fingers. Sometimes she felt it move in her flesh, like a seed taking root. That bone arrow was not just a wound, it was a slab, an anchor, a chain. Without it, she could truly be free. But he would not come out. It had been stuck under her mouth, where all the words gathered, and between her fingers, where the escape began. Every movement tore her apart. But the water, if it really had that much power. The claw woman approached the edge of the deck. Bending down, she touched the pillar with the tip of her finger. She was wet, and she was trembling. The waters under the deck moved with a mysterious force, pulling and pushing, like giant muscles. If she could lean between two pillars, if she could let herself be pressed between them, the power of the water could become a tool. She lowered herself. She arched her body between two posts, her fingers digging into the slippery shell. The water rushed past her with fury, but also rhythm. She squeezed. The pressure increased. The pain erupted. The bone beneath her mouth trembled. It was as if a living flame had penetrated her flesh. Her breath caught. She tried to scream, but the mouth in her palm only let out a ragged gasp. The pressure increased. The posts vibrated. The water roared a little more. She squeezed her body between the posts and, with a final effort, let the full weight of her being pressed directly onto the wounds. A sound like the cracking of a skull echoed in the silence. The bone detached. It fell from the flesh with a wet sound, followed by a thin jet of dark liquid, not blood, but something thicker, older. The claw woman fell to the deck, trembling, and her open mouth groaned a deep, painful sob. The pain was immense. But the bone was no longer in her. She took it carefully, dirty with the dark sap of her body, and for the first time truly looked at it. It was long carved, and had fine writings, impossible to read, but she felt they were commands. The bone had not been just a weapon. It had been a sealed, silent command, driven into her by the hand of the Dark King. With it in her body, she could not think freely, could not truly run. Now she was free. But she did not throw it away. The claw woman took the bone and, with a slow movement, placed it back. Not in the flesh, but hid it behind her right ear, where she could hear whispers, but no one could reach it. There the bone became a trophied, a testimonied, potential weapon. She did not forget. The woman claw did not forgive. She stood up. She trembled, but the pain no longer dominated her. That green light burst from her eyes again, but now it was more alive, freer, more fluid. The bridge vibrated, and the crack in the wall of water widened slightly, like a portal opened just for her. It was time to step towards the world of people, and claw woman, for the first time without pain, stepped towards the crack in the water, with Tenebro's bone hidden, and with the light of her eyes burning like two green stars. Chapter 7. The Liberating Bridge and the Vow of Vengeance. The Gromy land trembled. Not with fear. Not with anxiety. It trembled with hatred. Evil insects had emerged from cracks, from crevices, from underground faults. Ants the size of fists, beetles with shells as black as night, spiders with yellow eyes and bone claws, swarms of grey wasps that buzzed like poison. All were gathering in a black vortex, led by a single being, Varlok, the Old One, the one who had never lied. Because he didn't need to, he only sought, he followed, he devoured. Varlok did not walk, he did not fly, he floated above the earth, with a cloak formed by insect wings that carried him in silence. His body was made of the chitin of the thousands of beings that inhabited it. He had eyes in all directions and a mouth silent, but when he spoke, all the insects listened to him, in a trembling chorus, like an echo of the groaning earth. Arriving at the end of the Liberator Bridge, Varlok raised his emperor beetle head and looked at the figure who was already standing near the crack in the water wall. The claw woman. The green glow in her eyes lit up the bridge like a living spell. In one hand she clutched her flesh wounded by the pulled bone, in the other, nothing, but it was obvious that she carried a new will. You broke away from your masters, Varlok whispered, but his voice came from thousands of mouths. You broke the command and stepped into defiance. The claw woman raised her body between the pillars of the bridge and looked at the gathering swarm. She said nothing at first. She just kept her head bowed, her eyes shining in the night. I was bound. Now I am alive. You are a living mistake, Varlok said, and the swarm murmured after him. An entity that was meant to listen. You were created from the core of Gromi. Out of hatred, out of coldness, out of death wish. You were not meant to think. Just to execute. The claw woman smiled with her mouth in her palm, a wide and defiant smile. Maybe I was not meant to, but here I am. And I wonder, Varlok, how many years have you lived just listening? How much poison have you swallowed just to be the shadow of a half-dead king? A shudder ran through the swarm, a tremor, a hesitation. Varlok was silent for a moment, then suddenly raised a chitinous hand. The insects stirred. Turn around, he said, or you will be devoured on the very bridge that gave you escape. The claw woman took a step back, towards the wall of water. The crack in its middle pulsed, like a heart. Beyond the unknown, but also freedom. I will not return, Varlok, but I announce to you now, with all that I have in me, I will return. Not as a servant, not as a weapon, but as judgment. The land of Gromi will not remain unchanged, Varlok roared. Not from his throat, but through the swarm that accompanied him. Wasps descended like black rains, ants climbed the pillars, spiders spun webs between the edge of the deck and the crack in the water. They wanted to stop her. The claw woman jumped, a blinding light burst from her eyes, and her body rose. Slightly above the deck. The insects stopped, blinded, fell. But the swarm was too numerous. She approached, gathered around her. She raised her palm, and the mouth in the middle said a single word. Gromi will fall. And then, she jumped. The passage through the water crack was not easy. She was like a living membrane, like a skin between the worlds. For a second as long as eternity, her body was crushed between the worlds, as if reality hesitated to accept it. But past, and behind her, the bridge sank in a roar of broken waters. The insects screamed, but they could no longer follow her. The claw woman fell from the sky of another world, into a blue sea of water. The air was clean. The sky did not have the sick hue of Gromi. Here was the world of men, a world she had dreamed of, but had never known. She rose slowly. Behind her ear, the bone of Tenebros still vibrated faintly. But she was no longer master. She was a talisman. She was a memory. The claw woman was free. And in the world of men, no one yet knew what she had awakened to. Chapter 8. The Dance of the Waters and the Language of Life. For the first time since she had been created, the claw woman cried. Not from pain, not from anger, but from a feeling she could not name. She fell into the water of the world of men like a living tear, and she let herself be engulfed by the liquid wave, floating among the strands of algae and the waves of the sea shining in the light of a morning that seemed to be made of molten silver. Her body, made of old fabrics and hidden curses, relaxed, her wounds closed easily, as if the sea itself was caressing her. She felt light, free. She was no longer tied to the land of Gromi, nor to the forest, nor to order, nor to pain. She swam. Her fingers became swimmers. The face in her palm breathed deeply through the water and let out small bubbles that rose to the surface, smiling. Everything was silence and everything was song. From the depths a silver shadow appeared. Then another, and another. Dolphins, a group of 4, circled around her with playful, graceful movements, like a ritual dance. They touched her lightly. With the tip of their snouts, greeted her, called her to follow them. The claw woman, who once would have attacked any living being, let herself be led. And then, she heard a voice. Not in her mind. Not in the language of humans or the shadow, a vibration, a pure sound that touched her heart if she had won. You are new, said the largest dolphin. But you are not evil. Not now. Can I understand? Asked the claw woman. The dolphins laughed, a laugh like bells in the water. All those who are reborn in the water understand us. Water washes away what was. Water opens what was closed. The claw woman followed them to a coral forest, where schools of colorful fish passed like shooting stars. An old octopus crept out of a sunken vessel and approached slowly, watching her with intelligent eyes. You are from the shadows, said the octopus. But you have been touched by the light. We do not pass judgment here. We only dance. Around her, the sea pulsed with life. Transparent jellyfish undulated like the veils of a queen. Starfish clung to white rocks. A curious baby shark approached and circled her. There was no attack, no fear. It was just life. For the first time, the claw woman understood what it meant to be fearless. What it meant not to pursue, not to be pursued. Not to command, not to destroy, but simply to exist. Is this how you live? She asked, cupping her mouth, looking around. Is this what freedom is like? Freedom, said the octopus, is not just the absence of chains. T is the joy of seeing and feeling without being told what to feel. Joy, whispered the claw woman, an unknown word, but sweet and gromy world. No one spoke that word. It did not exist. The dolphins enveloped her again, closer. They touched her with their foreheads, greeted her as if she were a newborn sister. At night, you shine, said one. You are like us. You are a being who can choose. The claw woman, as she swam through forests of seaweed and labyrinths of reefs, felt something soften within her. It was not weakness. It was a void that was filling with light. It was the wonder of discovering that the world is not made only of orders and obedience, but also of choice. She stopped near a submerged trunk, and in the mirror of the water she saw her face reflected. That face, with its green eyes, its mouth that uttered curses and now spoke simple words, was smiling. Not a smile of cunning. Not a false smile. But a curious smile, almost childish. I exist, she asked, almost whispering. You exist, and you are not alone. The claw woman floated there for a while, among the creatures that did not judge her, did not ask her, did not want anything. They accepted her. And in that place, in the middle of the sea, for the first time since she had been born from the root of a cursed tree and shaped by the will of a tyrannical king and a heartless queen, the claw woman felt alive. That night, when the sky was clear and the stars were reflected in the water, the claw woman rose gently from the depths. Her green eyes shone like two fireflies of the abyss. Her body seemed translucent, and the light she emanated hid her from the gaze of those who would have wanted to hunt her, and there, floating between the stars and the sea, she whispered to herself, I am not just a tool, I am no longer just revenge. But if you made me like this, I will show the world why you dreaded. Chapter 9. The Black Stone Throne. In the cold palace, carved from black rock and covered with dried roots that grew backwards, descending from the ceiling like the hands of the dead, King Tenebros sat motionless on his throne. The throne was not made for comfort, but for pain. Each back was carved from the bones of beings lost to the curse, and each arm of the throne pulsed gently, as if it were alive. Before him, on the black tiles, Varlok knelt, covered in a thin layer of insects that climbed and descended his body, like living armor. Say, Varlok, Tenebros said in a stone voice, did you follow her to the end of the deck? Varlok slowly looked up. From his red eyes, two transparent beetles slipped, falling to the ground. I followed her, Great Dark One. She reached the Bridge of Liberation. She read. She understood. And she escaped. The palace fell silent. Even the black breath of fire from the stone torches stopped for a moment, as if ashamed to burn any longer. She escaped? Queen Narcola asked softly, stepping out of the shadows, wearing a dress made of smoke and dead leaves. Her eyes did not look, but penetrated. Her voice was sharp, almost as sharp as a blade of ice. Did you let her escape, Varlok? No, Varlok's voice trembled slightly, but not with fear, but with humiliation. My insects saw everything, but they couldn't penetrate the water crack. She managed to pull out the king's bone using the pressure of the pillars below the deck. She endured the pain. And now, she's in the human world. Queen Narcola approaches. Rotten leaves sprouted from her footsteps, burning themselves. So, the entity I created left the Gromy land without our command. She wasn't meant to be free, the Dark King whispered. She was meant to listen to us, to kill in our name, to crawl through fear. Not to dream. Not to feel. A dull flash of lightning briefly lit the black walls of the throne room and the obsidian mirror above the hole. The Gromy sky darkened even more. What do we do now? Narcola asked. Do we let her taste freedom? Do we let her learn joy? Do we let her forget who she is? Tenebros stood up. Tall, thin, with grey skin and a cloak made of the ashes of the lost. He walked slowly towards the altar at the end of the hall. There, under a smoke bell, was a pulsating map. The fracture map, which linked the Gromy land to the human world through all the magical cracks created by millennia, and the center of the map, a bright area, a cracked, small but active portal. She came out through the water crack, he said. And now, she floats free. She turned to Narcola. But she will not stay that way. Not yet. Not without consequences. The queen approached the altar, stretching her wax-white hand over the map. A part of her still belongs to us. Part of your bone, my dear, is in her body. Even if it no longer hurts, she carries it. She feels us. And sooner or later, she will be drawn back. Tenebros made a sign. Varlok stood up, insects swarming around him with a nervous flutter. Varlok, I entrust you with the next task, the king spoke. Send the swarms into the world of men. Let them spread, sniff out her tracks, search her hiding places. We will not show ourselves yet. But we will know everything. Narcola added in a low voice. And when she begins to believe that she is one of them, we will bring her back. But not as a servant. But as an enemy, whispered Tenebros. As an enemy who has turned against those who gave her life. Varlok bowed his head. As you command. And he left, the swarms after him, like a living night that creeps through the cracks of reality. Only the king and queen remained in the throne room. Tenebros sat back on the painful throne. She was forged of curse and bone. But also of thought. Our mistake, Narcola said, smoothing his smoke cloak, was that we thought we could mold her without giving her the desire to escape. Tenebros closed his eyes. We will see if she is truly alive, when she chooses us.Or them. And then, for the first time in centuries, in the midst of the black stone throne, a fleeting thought crossed the king's mind. What happens to shadows when they begin to dream? Chapter 10. The Claw Woman in the Enchanted Forest. The Claw Woman, her face carved into her palm and her green eyes still shining from the sea light, was stepping for the first time on the land of the enchanted forest. The trees were tall and gentle, the leaves murmured at the touch of the wind, and the air was warm, smelling of flowers, of wet earth, and of life. Here everything seemed alive, not only in body, but also in soul. Left alone, but changed, she felt that this world was different from Gromy, not only bright, but alive in ways she could not even describe. The first sound she heard was a thin rustle, a delicate movement in the tall grass. From the thicket appeared a deer, with golden velvet fur and large, gentle eyes. It stopped in front of the Claw Woman without fear, but with an ancient curiosity, such as only enchanted animals can have. You are not from our forest, said the deer in a voice like a breeze. Have you touched the water of life? Have you looked at the light of the sky? The Claw Woman lowered her head, and the face in her palm spoke, trembling. I come from a land of shadows, from Gromy, but I have passed through water and light, and now I no longer feel the same hunger, I no longer feel the desire to tear. The deer approached, gently touching the back of her palm with its soft snout. Your soul smells of fear, but it has already begun. The enchanted forest speaks to all who can hear. You have begun to listen. That is why you understand our voice. From the blackberry bushes, a small rabbit jumped, white with grey spots on its ears. Its eyes were playful and clear, and its voice had the flicker of a spark. And if it hears, what? Maybe there have been others like her. Maybe it is a trick. Maybe it is just a form of cunning, like those in the legends beyond the forest barrier. The Claw Woman moved her fingers that carried her. From her eyes, that light that she had discovered in the sea sparkled faintly. I could catch you in my palm and crush you, Bunny. But I don't want to anymore. The rabbit stopped suddenly, then hopped closer, carefully studying the expression on the face in the palm. You don't want to anymore? Who doesn't want to anymore? You're not what you used to be. Maybe the forest has changed you. Not the forest, said the Claw Woman. Water. Light. The gaze of dolphins, baby sharks smiled at me, and in that smile was a whole world. Then, from the shadow of an oak tree, an old bear stepped out. His fur was the color of ash, his eyes were like old forests, and his voice thundered like the earth. You are a stranger, Palm Woman. You smell of two worlds. Tell me, who created you and what do you carry with you? The Claw Woman turned her back, slightly lifting the back of her hand, where between two fingers, supported by the back of an ear, was the bone of Tenebros. I am a creature born from the root of a cursed tree. Tenebros thrust me into the world. I carried in my palm a bone that commanded my body. Now I am free. But I do not yet know who I am. The bear growled long. You cannot run from the shadow that created you, but you can choose where your steps take you. If you have understood our language, it means that you have opened yourself. The forest told us that one day a being will come from the darkness who will be able to see beyond its blood. Maybe it is you. Maybe not. But you were welcomed. Stay overnight. They all gathered around her, the deer, the rabbit, a family of squirrels, a silent badger, an old owl on an alder branch. The forest sang softly. The claw woman, who had once been an instrument of murder, lay lying in the grass, among fragile creatures, and no one attacked her, no one was afraid. What do you do at night? She asked in a low voice. We sleep. We dreamed. We listen to our hearts. Sometimes we keep each other warm. Sometimes we tell each other stories, said the deer. What is a dream? Asked the claw woman again. The owl blinked slowly, then said, the dream is the world you can build without the bone in your palm. That night, for the first time in her existence, the claw woman did not feel the pain of walking. She was not followed. She did not feel the hunger for blood. Her face fell asleep, and in her palm a faint smile appeared, a dream of a forest that no longer lies, of a world where shadows do not lead, but only lag behind. And so, the claw woman fell asleep in the enchanted forest, a creature of darkness, but dreaming of light. Chapter 11. Awakening in the Enchanted Forest. Morning crept gently over the enchanted forest, carrying in its breath the scent of open flowers and the murmur of leaves embraced by dew. The sun's rays, warm and gentle like a mother's caress, slipped through the tall branches, dancing on the claw woman's forehead. Green eyes in the palm of her hand slowly opened, like a window open to a world she still did not fully understand. Her body, surrounded by branches and grass, was stretched out on the soft moss, and on the back of her hand slept a squirrel that had nested there during the night. A colorful butterfly had settled on the fleshy cheek carved in her palm, and the deer that had been watching over her remained nearby, watching her with clear eyes. The claw woman breathed deeply. For the first time since she could remember her existence, she felt no pain, no burden, no command in her soul. The bone of Tenebros, which had been stuck under her mouth, had been removed. The shadow of her masters had remained behind, beyond the bridge. Now she was here in the light, among beings who looked at her without fear, but with amazement. Did you dream? The deer asked, approaching her slowly. I don't know, answered the claw woman, and the face in her palm blinked slowly. There was a deep silence. I felt enveloped by something that didn't ask anything of me. Maybe that was dreaming. The rabbit also appeared, jumping happily from a bush. You fell asleep and snored, you know. But not like bears, but like a breeze that whistles through the leaves. It was soothing. How do you feel? Asked the old bear, coming out of the trees with heavy steps. The claw woman slowly stood up. Her body was still long and strange, but she moved without pain. Her large hand, with fingers like legs, now seemed almost natural in the forest landscape. I feel as if I no longer wear a shell, as if I am no longer tied to that dark pit that gave birth to me. Suddenly, birds began to come from all directions. Hummingbirds and woodpeckers, blackbirds and owls, starlings and little siskins. They sat on branches, on leaves, on tree trunks, forming a living audience hall around her. Even the flowers around her seemed taller, with their corollas pointing towards her. The plants fluttered their leaves gently, in a dance of curiosity. Tell us, said a blue bird, what is this Gromy land from which you come? Its name has passed through the roots and been spoken by the wind, but we do not know it. The claw woman was silent for a moment. Then, in her low voice, trembling and hollowed out by threat, she began. Gromy is not a place, but a wound. It is a land where shadows have bodies, and thoughts are not yours. The beings there are created not from love or balance, but from hatred and hunger. There is no sky, only mist. There are no birds, only insects that look at you soullessly. And there is no living word, only order and silence. A murmur passed through the forest. The leaves trembled, the birds fluttered, and even the flowers closed their petals for a moment. What do you want now, being who fled Gromy? asked a white flower with a fountain voice. The claw woman looked around, and for a moment she seemed like a child, a palm with eyes in the middle of the world. I don't know yet. But I want to find out what it means to live without destroying.To, feel without tearing. I want to teach you your language.To, listen. Maybe this way. I will learn who I am. The bear growled again, but not harshly. If you are honest, the forest will keep you. But know this. The shadows within you will try to wake up. You were born with a purpose, and that purpose does not die easily. I know, said the claw woman. But now, for the first time, I feel I can choose. The sun was rising in the sky, and its light fell on the face in the palm of my hand like a blessing. The birds were singing, the leaves were rustling, and among the trees of the forest, a creature once born of terror, now stood quietly among the living and dreamed, not of blood, but of freedom. Thus began a new day in the enchanted forest, and the claw woman, without knowing it, was taking the first steps towards another destiny. Chapter 12. The Road to the Palace of the Queen of the Forest. At dawn on the second day in the enchanted forest, the air had a special sweetness, like honey dripping from the acacia flowers. The claw woman was still standing in the clearing where she had slept, surrounded by animals, when the old deer appeared. His antlers resembled the branches of a 1,000-year-old tree, and his eyes retained the reflection of hundreds of springs. Claw woman, his voice was deep and soft, like old water. You brought with you a shadow, but also a longing for light. If you want to find out who you are and what you can become, go to the palace of the Queen of the Forest. Her name is Saralindra, daughter of the green dawn, born from the seed of a word tree and a shooting star. She sees beyond appearance and feels the truth from the root of the heart. Will she receive a being like me? Asked the claw woman, and the face in the palm twitched. She does not judge. She listens. And in the heart of her palace, even the beings of Gromi can learn who they truly are, said the stag. The claw woman's path began among the trees that bowed slightly as she passed. Without the pain in Tenebrose's bone, she could walk without difficulty. When she remembered old sufferings, she walked more slowly, but then she drank water from a clear, cold spring, and its taste washed away her dark memories. What is this taste? She had asked a rabbit who accompanied her. That's the fearless life, answered the rabbit. Water that asks for nothing, only washes you. She smelled the forest. The air was full of unknown perfumes, leaves wet with dew, flowers in bloom, bark hot from the sun, living earth. As she advanced, the forest had widened, and in front of her a shimmer of water like a transparent heart had opened, the lake of the hidden heart. There, on the edge, she stopped. She watched the silver fish swimming, a frog sitting quietly on a lily pad, and dragonflies flying like joyful thoughts. For the first time, the claw woman smiled without guile, without fear. Then she saw the palace. Queen Saralindra's palace was carved into the trunk of a giant tree, so tall that its top seemed to be lost in the sky. The walls were not of stone, but of living bark, shiny greenish-white, like birch bark woven with threads of gold. The roots of the tree stretched like bridges over streams, and flowers grew directly from the beams and pillars. Each room had large windows, through which the sun and moon entered unhindered. The great gate. 2 white owls looked at her in silence, then shook their heads and flew in circles above her. The doors opened without being touched, and the claw woman stepped in with amazement. Queen Saralindra sat on a throne of living branches, and her dress was woven of jasmine leaves and dried stars. Her hair was long, reaching to her heels, and the color of mist on a summer morning. Welcome, being of the shadow with eyes of light, said the queen. I have been waiting for you. Why have you been waiting for me? Asked the claw woman, embarrassed, but still drawn to the warmth of the voice. Because a creature that was chained and sought escape carries within it the seed of another world. The queen invites her to the royal table, where animals large and small, plants and beings from all corners of the forest sat in harmony. Fragrant fruits, edible flowers, sweet juices and luminous food filled the table. The claw woman looked at everything with suspicion, but finally tasted, and discovered that no taste was bitter. There she also met Princess Linyara, daughter of Queen Saralindra, a 17-year-old girl with honey-green hair and eyes like 2 fresh leaves. She spoke with a dreamy gentleness and a wisdom unusual for her age. You come from a world where evil is a garment you must wear, Linyara said. Here, you can learn to shed it. But it will hurt. I have already felt the pain, answered the claw woman. No, said Linyara, that was the pain imposed. What will come is the pain of choice. The claw woman did not understand everything, but for the first time, a bud of trust had begun to grow in her heart. Maybe she was not just a servant of horror. Maybe the beings who looked at her without fear could teach her who she was or who she could become. And the palace of the forest received her in silence and with light. And the living roots felt her steps and recognized her as a guest. And at the top of the tree, where no one climbed, a shooting star flickered again. Chapter 13. The Garden of the Sun and the Secret of Writing. After the quiet meal, full of strange but gentle aromas, Queen Seralindra invited the claw woman to go outside, into the palace gardens. The air was sweet, and the sunlight was intertwined with cool breezes. Beyond the gate, vividly carved from leaves and flowers, the Garden of the Sun opened, a place where everything seemed to live under an eternal morning ray. The trees had yellow and orange crowns, although it was not autumn. The flowers sang with thin voices, and the grass moved smoothly, as if breathing in the same rhythm with the heart of the forest. The claw woman walked silently beside the queen. She felt small, but at the same time, for the first time, she was no longer afraid of her smallness. Then, right at the entrance to the garden, on an old tree bark, written words appeared in raw green. Welcome. The claw woman stopped. A jolt gripped her palm, and the face within her opened its eyes wide, as if recognizing something forgotten. You? Was it you? She asked softly, looking at the queen. Queen Seralindra smiled slightly, but said nothing immediately. She bent down and stroked the tree with her long, slender fingers. I did not write the words, but I called them, she said. Someone dear and brave crossed the borders of fear, flew to the Gromy land, and whispered your way into the bark of the trees. I only watched. Silently, at that moment, from behind a yellow flower, a shining beetle emerged, its carapace brown and shiny, covered with spots of emerald green light. It slowly climbed a leaf and then raised its head, looking straight at the claw woman. I am Clinta, he said in a thin but clear voice. I was once an ordinary beetle, but the queen gave me my word and my courage. I passed under the eyes of Varlok and through the shadows of Tenebros, only to write on the bark. You are followed, but you are not alone. Then, was it not a vision? Asked the claw woman, remembering the words that had appeared on the tree in the shadow forest. No, said the queen. The words are alive here. They come from hearts, not ink. Clinta slightly bent her antennae and continued. I saw how you walked wounded, how you searched for the light, how you hid the bone of Tenebros, and I knew that you were not lost. Even a small beetle can understand when someone begins to fight for freedom. The claw woman felt her palm tremble, and her face in her hand whispered softly. Thank you. The queen leaned towards her slightly. You were not created for evil, but because someone else wanted to see what fear looks like. But fear can turn into courage. And you have begun to see that. You are not yet what you will be, but you are much more than you were. The claw woman said nothing. A tear fell from the eye in the middle of her palm and fell onto the soft earth, and in that place, without anyone touching or seeing something, a bud sprouted. Where a sincere tear flows, a new life begins, said Clinta, and then disappeared among the blades of grass and the Garden of the Sun. In the warm silence of twilight, the claw woman felt for the first time that she was seen. And Queen Seralindra walked beside her, not as a mistress, but as a silent mother of all wounded beings. Chapter 14. The Garden of the Moon and the Secret of Clinta. In the warm light of noon, a restless breeze passed over the palace in the heart of the enchanted forest. Queen Seralindra, her face serene but her eyes worried, rose from the table. The leaves began to whisper to each other, and the birds that had been chirping happily until then sat silently on the branches. An emergency has arisen in the northern part of the forest, the queen said in a soft but determined voice. I must go. Linyara, my daughter, remains with you. Princess Linyara nodded, and Seralindra touched her forehead with a ray of her finger and disappeared down the path of green crystals that led deep into the woods. The claw woman looked at Linyara, amazed by her calm and nobility. She was 17, but her eyes were as old as the forest, large and deep, with a strange shade of silver purple. She was dressed in a long dress of light leaves, and on her shoulders stood Clinta, the brave beetle. Come with us, the princess said, smiling. I want to show you the Garden of the Moon. It is the place where shadows do not hurt, and darkness does not frighten. They walked along a silent path, and the sky gradually darkened. Stars appeared out of nowhere, suspended between the branches. Soon, they arrived at the Garden of the Moon, a place where the night was eternal, but not cold, but comforting. The trees had silver leaves, the flowers emitted a blue light, and the animals, foxes, deer, owls, shone like creatures from a dream. The claw woman felt her breathing slow. Not even in the depths of the waters had she seen such silent beauty. Here rests the soul of the forest, said Linyara. Here come those who have not seen stars for a long time. I didn't even know I could look at the stars without hating them, whispered the claw woman. Clinta climbed off the princess's shoulder and stopped on a large leaf, which emitted a greenish light. Do you want to know how I tricked Varlok? He asked proudly. I lived many years in the Gromy land, in the thickets of bones and smoke. But to Varlok, all insects were mere pawns. He didn't look at our faces, only at orders. Oh, I pretended to be one of the spies. I hid under the wing of a giant wasp and traveled unseen to the Tower of Shadows. And he didn't feel you? No, I can turn off my light when I want. And I can lie like a black fly, he said in a proud voice. I rode on the bark before his eyes. But he never knew. And with a drop of the sap of the trees here, I changed my scent so that I wouldn't be recognized. The claw woman smiled truly for the first time. Looking at Clinta, that enchanted beetle who had the gift of speech, but brave, she realized that sometimes the little ones have weapons that the big ones never see. You have done more for me than anyone has ever done. You took a risk. But why? Clinta looked at her, seriously now. Because I felt that you are not just a claw. You are also a palm. And in your palm there is a face that can cry. Whoever cries can be saved. Linyara approached and took the claw woman's hand in hers. She was not afraid of the fingers, nor of the eyes in the hand, nor of the scar where Tenebro's bone had once been. You were created to hurt, but you began to feel. Here, in the enchanted forest, feelings can bloom. If you want, we can nurture them together. The claw woman looked around. The animals walked silently, like shadows of light. A deer with silver antlers approached her and bowed before her. Flowers that had never had names opened in the path of her steps. I don't know if I can, but I feel like I want to, she said. That's all that matters, Linyara said. And above the Garden of the Moon, a star fell, silently, shining for a moment brighter than any other. Chapter 15. The Army of the Queen of the Enchanted Forest. At dawn, the moon garden was still asleep in its mysterious light, but the claw woman felt a call from the depths of the forest. Linyara led her down a path covered with golden lichens that seemed to stretch into the heart of a powerful silence. At the end of the path, a wide clearing opened up under a dome of tall branches, and there, arranged in orderly and living circles, an unusual army awaited her. The claw woman stopped, overwhelmed by the sight that unfolded before her. Orderly, prepared, alive, beyond imagination. Beside her, Clinta, now wearing a tiny green gold breastplate, walked proudly. Welcome to the army of Queen Seralindra, he told her in a voice deeper than he had known. I am the Supreme Commander, and today, I will introduce you to those who defend this land. From the first circle, 100 blue lizards, shining in the sun like living daggers, had stuck out their poisonous tongues in greeting. Their bodies were thin and fast, and their eyes blinked continuously, sparkling with intelligence and fighting instinct. They are the night attackers, Clinta said. Silently, he glides through the grass and paralyzes with a single touch. Then he pulled back a little and pointed to the second circle, 100 yellowish-green frogs, with large eyes and sticky tongues like elastic whips. They are hunters of air and thought. They catch anything that flies or spies. They know how to identify the scent of fear and can catch the messengers of shadows. In an almost invisible movement, 100 chameleons materialized from the air near the clearing. They had become visible only because they wanted to be seen. Their bodies pulsed gently, changing their colors in waves of green and purple. Our scouts, said Clinta. Those who step unseen in the forbidden lands, who listen without being heard. They have learned that the shadows of Tenebros are stirring. They will bring news of the first battle. The deep sound, like a metal wing, made the foliage tremble. From the sky and the earth appeared 100 huge, green, powerful locusts, which lined up with rigid leaps in the front line. These are the living wall, the front line. They strike like lightning and fear no death. They shed their green blood for the queen without blinking. The claw woman took a step forward. Beyond the organized beasts, other smaller and more diverse creatures gathered. Sentinel ants, spiders whose fangs flashed venom, giant bees with fiery needles. Clinter stood on a leaf and raised one leg like a thin spear. Here they are, the soldiers of the forest. They are not made of fire and metal, but of instinct, loyalty, and the patience of nature. Each has a place. Each fights not for destruction, but for balance. The claw woman looked into the eyes of each creature and felt, for the first time, that she was not alone in a world that rejected her. Her heart trembled in her palm. The face in her hand felt. She was beginning to believe. "And can I fight alongside them?" she asked. Clinter looked at her for a long time, then smiled. "You were created for horror. But if you want, you can become part of this defense. Not as a weapon, but as a living being." And then, as a sign, the forest shook a leaf of light in front of the claw woman. Tea was a small badge, made of filigree bark and drops of resin, the symbol of those who chose to no longer be shadows. It caught it behind her right ear, where she had once hidden the bone of Tenebros. And the forest knew now that the claw woman was no longer just an entity of darkness. She was a being who had chosen. Chapter 16. 10 Serpents and the Green Traitor. In the shadow hall of the abyssal palace of the Gromy Land, the Dark King, with his eyes of smoke and his hands like dry branches of ash, rose from the throne of the rift. Queen Narcola, with her spider-like hair and a voice that made ice weep, walked behind him. Before them, in a posture of submission, stood Varlok, the master of venomous insects, with the body of a man and the wings of a black wasp. "The time has come to break the balance," muttered the Dark King, looking into the depths of a mirror made of solid darkness. "The enchanted forest has strengthened, but it is not unconquerable. Queen Seralindra has received our creature into her heart," Narcola hissed. "The claw woman has turned against us, but her heart still bears the shadow of our bone. We need only touch her again." Varlok raised a stained hand, from which thin threads of venom dripped. "The servants are ready. But first, let us know the way. 10 eyes, 10 tongues, 10 of the most cunning." From the corner of the hall, through a deep, dark crack, 10 black snakes, slender and shiny as fuel, slithered one by one. Their eyes were red as frozen blood, and their tongues danced in the foul air of the throne. "We are the ears of darkness," hissed the largest of them. "We are the creeping in the leaves. We are the bite without a cure." "Pass through the earth crack," Tenebros commanded, "at the edge where the roots no longer grow and the earth weeps. There a green brother awaits you. He knows the language of the forest, but also ours, trader who will open the moss gates." Narcola approached and placed a cold hand on the back of the leading snake. "Do not be seen, not leave a trace. But bring us the map of the heart of the forest, where the queen rests, where the claw woman hides, where the garden of the moon and the garden of the sun are." The snakes coiled around each other and slithered towards the darkness that led outside the kingdom. At the edge of the enchanted forest, in a clearing covered with ivy, a green snake, with shiny scales and yellow eyes, rose among the roots. His name was Zelka, and he knew all the paths, springs, birds and animals, the enchanted forest. He knew the secrets of the queen's garden and had been spying for the Gromy for years. No one knew of his betrayal. He wore a mask of wisdom and friendship. He posed as a guardian of the edges, a protector of rare trees. The black snakes surrounded him. "Zelka," hissed their leader, "open the forest for us. Show us where the queen's blood is, where the wandering bone is, where the hidden one sits." Zelka had arched his neck in a sly smile. "Silence, shadow brothers. Listen to the birds, but do not believe them. Forget the smell of the flowers. The moon garden is under the protection of the claw woman and the princess. You will sneak through the roots. I will show you an entrance under the lake. Bypassed. Unknown. The forest has no eyes there. Your betrayal will be rewarded, Zelka," hissed another snake. Zelka chuckled softly. "I do not betray. I survived. If the forest falls, I remained. If the shadows burn, I escape." And so, 10 black snakes entered the heart of the forest, hidden under the moss and among the stones, with Zelka opening their way to the heart of the dream. But the forest felt. The roots trembled. The flowers closed their petals. And the queen, far away, in her palace of light, stopped in the middle of a whisper. "Something bad has entered." Chapter 17. The Quest in the Black Fissure. In the green stone hall of the forest palace, between the living stems and the floating lights of the guardian fireflies, Queen Seralindra stood bent over the living map, a sprawling bark on which roots moved that drew in real time the paths and disturbances of the forest. A black spot pulsed at its edge, where the springs ended and the earth became cracked and scorched. The queen looked up at the three who stood before her. Claw woman, you have known the darkness. You have escaped from it. Now you must look at it again, but not for yourself, but for the forest that received you. Princess Linyara, my daughter, has asked to go. This is her first mission. You will defend her. Clinta, you will be my eye in the shadows. Clinta, the beetle regal, she spread her green wings with golden iridescence and bowed her head. Shadow does not stop me, nor venom. I will tread in silence, my queen. The claw woman took a step forward. She was no longer as fearsome as she once had been, but silent, upright, and shining faintly under the lights of the leaves. I will return to the mist of the rift, but not as prey. But as a guardian I will defend Linyara with my body and my light. Even if the bone of Tenebros behind my ear burns again. Linyara, wearing a cloak embroidered with moon leaves and her hair tied around her forehead with a wreath of blooming moss, stepped resolutely between them. Mother said the forest grows for us to defend. I have dreamed of weeping roots and animals that slept without dreams. We must know what entered through the rift. And we must be the first to know. The queen entrusted them with a small, faintly pulsing amber globe, a living sign that would turn black if betrayal or ultimate danger touched the forest. Your mission is to search and return. Don't fight, don't provoke. Find what passed through the crack in the black earth. If it's poison, we'll stop it. If it's a spy, we'll catch it. If it's betrayal, we'll extinguish it. They set off under the soft earth of noon, on a hidden path that descended in silence. The leaves whispered their footsteps, and the air grew wetter, heavier. On the way, Clinta flew overhead, and Linyara and the claw woman walked alongside, talking in whispers. Aren't you afraid to go? Asked the claw woman, looking at her with her deep eyes. I am. But the old deer also told me that sometimes fear is a form of courage. Mother trusts me. And I trust you. I was created out of fear, said the claw woman. But in the forest, I felt the light for the first time. Maybe I too can be a shield. For you. For this world. Clinta descended beside them, lightly touching the ground with his slender feet. I feel vibrations. We are not alone. Something crawled through the dead forest. Traces of scales, and a thin, green trailed a trader. Zelker? Asked Linyara. Mother considered him a guardian. Yes, said the claw woman, I felt his tongue in the past. And his scent is now poisonous. Each of us has a past, murmured the princess. But only some burn it to become something else. 3 shadows had gone towards the crack. 2 carried light. 1 carried the royal venom. But in the darkness, black eyes were already watching them. Chapter 18. The Mirror in the Heart of the Sea. The three of them moved slowly through the silent forest, where the trees became sparse and the earth tasted salty. In the distance, the sea breeze could be felt, and the waves called with an endless silence. The claw woman walked with determined steps, feeling the ground becoming wetter under her fingers. Clinta flew close to the ground, his antennae vibrating slightly, and Princess Linyara walked carefully, feeling that the place where they were was close to a secret edge, where the forest meets the sea. They found a low clearing, covered with fine grass, and they rested there, the sun trembling through the broad leaves. Linyara rested her head on the trunk of a leaning tree, and the claw woman placed her palm on the ground, like a creature between worlds, both living and ancient. Suddenly heard a high-pitched scream, carried by the wind. White gull descended in wide circles and stopped near Linyara, dropping a small mother-of-pearl shell into the princess's lap. The shell began to pulse gently and speak in a warm, deep voice. I am Aquilor, the blue dolphin, guardian of the shining sea. I felt turmoil in the depths and slippery shadows passing through the coral corridor. Envoys of Tenebros have crept through a crack in the seabed. Only the eyes of a being between worlds can see everything in the mirror in the heart of the sea. Talone woman, only you can enter there. Talone woman stood up suddenly. From her eyes, a pale glint faded then returned. Me. To enter the middle of the sea? Clinta sighed, a rustle of fine elytra. You were made for darkness, but you have learned the light. The sea is alive. It will receive you. Go and return with the truth. Linyara touched the claw woman lightly on the arm. Aquilor has only been mentioned to me in legends. If he has chosen you, it means he recognizes you. Show not fear. The sea will give you answers. The edge of the beach. The claw woman walked through the sands, with sure movements. Her long fingers sank into the sand, and when she reached the waves, it seemed that her body transformed. Her legs merged with the water, and her form became bright, like a giant firefly. She swam with unexpected ease, as if she had been born in the sea. Corals illuminated her from the depths, colorful fish passed by her, and translucent jellyfish enveloped her like living veils. Finally, she reached a round, quiet place, where the water seemed still and the sea sky descended directly into the background. There was the mirror of the heart of the sea on the smooth, deep surface. The claw woman saw clear images. 10 black snakes slithering through the roots of the depths, and an ancient tunnel opened in the wall of a cave to the north. She also saw Zelka, the treacherous green snake, waiting for her with his tongue wagging cunningly. The mirror pulsed for a moment, and a voice from the depths whispered to her, "Do not fear, claw woman. You are not a curse, but a gateway to renewal. Look and tell me what you saw." The claw woman tilted her head to the surface and whispered, "Thank you, Aqualor. Thank you, bright sea." When she emerged from the waters, blue drops shone on her fingers. The sea had released her gently. She returned to land, then started back towards the clearing, where Linyara and Clinta were waiting for her. "What did you see?" the princess asked with a heavy heart. 10 black snakes, and a crack in the rock, to the north. Zelka is waiting for them. We have little time. Clinta nodded. Then it is time to return and tell the queen. But something else shone in the claw woman's eyes. Not just fear, but determination. And for the first time, hope. Chapter 19. Queen Saralindra's Decision. Queen Saralindra's palace shone in the evening light, and the surrounding forests trembled with the worry of unexpected news. The claw woman, Princess Linyara, and the royal beetle Clinta hurried along the wide, golden moss-covered corridors, the sound of leaf bells announcing their arrival. Still carrying the scent of the sea on her body, the claw woman felt her heart beat with a new speed, not from fear, but from courage.In the Hall of Roots, where the trunks of the oldest trees joined in living arches. Queen Saralindra awaited them on her throne of jasmine and braided bark. Her long silver hair cascaded over her green shoulders, and in her eyes was the power of an entire forest. "Say, claw woman, what did your eye see in the depths of the sea?" asked the queen, in a voice that seemed like the gentle summer wind. The claw woman took a step forward, leaning slightly. "My queen, 10 black snakes have crept into the enchanted forest through an old crack in the northern rock. They are the envoys of Tenebros and Queen Narcola, and the traitor is Zelka, the green snake." He awaited them at the edge of the swamps, where the shadows fall deepest. A murmur was heard among the forest's counselors. A firefly, an old advisor, twitched on a leaf. Zelka. But he had been cured of Gromi's poison. He was welcomed into the forest with trust. The queen raised her hand and the whole room fell silent. "That means war is no longer a mere shadow, but a path coming straight at us," she said, then stood up. "Clinta, call your army. Tonight, the enchanted forest prepares for defense." Clinta, his black eyes shining with determination, made a short bow. "I will send 100 blue lizards north to blockade the swamps of silence. 100 green frogs will surround the springs. Scout chameleons will go before them. And the locusts will be the line of fire." "Good," said the queen. "But I do not want blood in my forest. Zelka will be captured, not killed. Perhaps the Gromi venom has changed him, but I want to understand why he chose betrayal." "I can go with the troops," Princess Linyara said with a determined glint. "It's my mission. The forest is mine too." "And I go with her," added the claw woman. "If Zelka has chosen the dark, perhaps he needs to be reminded of the light." The queen looked at her long, gently. "You were the shadow, and now you are the light. Go. Take this memory with you. Not all traitors are lost forever." Then, above the throne of leaves, a flock of light birds rose, a sign that the forest itself had heard and blessed the decision. Thus began the preparation. Bark drummers beat on tree trunks to rally the troops. Messenger birds flew south and east. Lizards sharpened their tongues, and frogs prepared their sticky jumps. That evening, Queen Saralindra stood in the Garden of the Sun and looked north, where the shadows moved more and more. Almost. And in the depths of the enchanted forest, a green snake, with sad eyes and a short tongue, waited. But he didn't know that those who come not only with weapons, but also with questions. Chapter 20. The Battle with the Bone of Tenebros. On a heavy morning, the fog had settled over the glades of the enchanted forest, and the air smelled of broken grass and wounded bark from the north. The unheard sound of an ancient danger was approaching. The bone of Tenebros, a vestige of dark power, had been pulled from the shadow of the depths by the very hand of the traitor, Zelka, the green serpent, once the guardian of the springs, now the servant of horror. The claw woman felt it first, behind her right ear, where she had hidden the bone that had once been bound to her. A dull pain began to pulse as they approached the granite glade where the forest had sent its troops. She saw Zelka emerge from the fog, carrying the ancient bone in his fangs, which shone like a white burn, almost alive. Around him crawled two snakes, black, poisonous, with eyes as red as embers. "You came to take him back?" Zelka spat contemptuously. "You were running from him, and now you have brought an army of lizards and beetles." The claw woman stepped forward, her back arching between the stone pillars. "No, Zelka, I came to break his chain. That bone held me captive, but now I am the one who can face it." The bone rose into the air, carried as if by an unseen hand. Black whirlwinds of dust rose around it. Everything it touched, grass, leaves, even the air, disintegrated like smoke, like a forgotten memory. Zelka laughed. "It's too late. The bone senses Tenebros, even from a distance, is coming, and nothing can stop him." But the claw woman raises her arms. A pale green light now flows from her body, taken from the springs of the forest and the waters of the sea. She snatches the bone from its hiding place under her ear and holds it in her palm. The two bones of Tenebros approach, the old one and the one carried by Zelka, and the sky darkens. "If I am destroyed, so be it, but the bone will no longer be the tool of evil," she cries and throws herself between the two spirals of smoke. A soundless thunder passes through the forest. The troops collapse to the ground. The lizards and frogs stick to the ground, and the locusts close their wings. When the cloud cleared, the bone had been swallowed into the hard earth, as if the forest itself had sucked him into its roots. Zelka lay entangled in webs of tangled moss, his tongue quivering. The two black snakes were bound with thick leaves and living bark and taken before Queen Seralindra, where they awaited judgment. The queen stepped toward Zelka. She spoke softly, but with pain. "I loved you as a son of the forest. You drank from our springs, you slept under our crowns. Why?" Zelka hissed weakly. "I was weak, but the bone called me. Once I touched it, everything became dark. There was no more fear, no more pain, only power. And yet, you are here, and your power has been buried. How do you feel now?" "Cold, and shame, and longing for light." The queen closed her eyes for a moment. "You will be taken to the deep root. The forest does not kill its traitors, but asks them to heal their hearts. You have much to learn, Zelka." The two black snakes were sent to the caves beneath the awakened earth, where only the truth can be spoken. The other 8 were set free to go to their dark king Tenebros and the ice queen Narcola. And the claw woman, tired but upright, stood, looking towards the place where the bone had been buried. That day, the enchanted forest not only defended its borders, but also freed one of its ancient shadows. Chapter 21. The Shadow's Premonition. The sun was setting gently over the palace of the enchanted forest, whose towers of leaves and vines shone in the golden rays of twilight, and the throne room, where light filtered through stained glass windows of petals. Queen Seralindra sat on her throne made of ancient oak trunk. Beside her, in a chair carved from vegetable ivory, sat the claw woman, silent, her face turned towards the large windows that opened onto the garden of the sun. Silence reigned in the hall, broken only by the murmur of a green stone fountain. "I sense your restlessness," the queen murmured, turning her gaze to her. "You have been silent all day, and the birds chirped carefully, feeling the weight of your thought." The claw woman raised her green eyes, which seemed to have a softer light now than in the past. "I fear, my queen, that what I saw at the mirror in the middle of the sea was only the beginning. The Dark King will not remain indifferent. I fought his bone, and I defeated him. But his shadow is alive. I know him, and I know he will come. Not alone, but with his entire army of venomous insects." The queen sighed, supporting her forehead with her hand with delicate fingers. "Varlok." "Yes," the claw woman answered in a low voice. "He leads the insects of Gromi. Thousands of iron-fanged locusts, fire-breathing wasps, spiders that weave darkness, and others more terrible, which I have never seen, but I have felt under the earth." The queen closed her eyes for a moment. Her forehead glowed slightly, a sign that the forest itself was sending her answers through dreams. Then there is no time for silence, we must prepare the forest. Clinter said that the army is ready to respond at any moment, but I believe that patrols should be sent to all four corners. And the springs will be the first to be attacked. Without water, the animals will weaken. This is how the Varlok works, from within. The queen rose slowly. Her robes fluttered like a leaf in the wind. We will call the council of creatures. And you, claw woman, you are part of this people now. The time when you were a fleeting shadow is over. Now you are one of us. Claw woman bows her head. Then I will fight as one of yours. And when the time comes, I will stand before Varlok. The queen put her hand on his shoulder and smiled sadly. You are not alone. The enchanted forest protects its children, even those who come from the darkness. From outside, a strange wind brought with it the smell of smoke and ash, although no flame had been lit. The shadow of Tenebros was approaching. Chapter 22. The shadow descends on the enchanted forest. On a moonless night, from the depths of the black rift that opened in the heart of the Gromy land, the seething sound of war was heard for the first time. It was a damp noise, like the rustle of diseased wings and the ground torn by chitinous feet between the smoking rocks. King Dark and Queen Narcola watched in silence as the army rose from the bowels of the earth. It is time to extinguish the light in the enchanted forest, Dark spoke in a low voice, laced with venom. And let us take back what was taken from us, Narcola added, his eyes sparkling like two stones of black ice in front of them. The army commander, Varlok, a tall creature with 8 slender legs, a shiny shell and yellow wasp eyes, raised one of his paws in the air. In that gesture, thousands of insects advanced like a wave of living night. Swarms of locusts with spiky tails fell from the skies. The ground was covered with giant ants that gnawed at the roots of the enchanted trees. Spiders the size of calves advanced silently, weaving darkness behind them, covering the light of the stars. Red wasps, with iron wings, flew in wide circles, making sharp sounds like knives. The head, Varlok, walked proudly, with 2 black flags of spiderweb stretched above him. On them was the symbol of darkness, a closed eye, surrounded by fangs. Do not spare the springs, he commanded. Burn the flowers that illuminate. Destroy the guardian trees. Queen Seralindra must feel helplessness before she falls. The insects were coming in waves. 10 forests on the edge of the kingdom were already engulfed in darkness. The trees groaned, and the wind brought increasingly eerie whispers to the enchanted forest. Through the underground tunnels, the traitor Zelka, now bound and guarded in the dungeon of Queen Seralindra's palace, shuddered. He knew what was coming. He felt the buzzing of insects coming. He muttered between his teeth. Too late to stop them. At the edge of the enchanted forest, the guardian fireflies flew in alarming circles. The leaves trembled, the springs retreated underground, and the flowers gathered their petals as if in prayer. The insects from the army of darkness had arrived. The forest would be defended, or consumed. Chapter 23. The Trap in the Murmuring River Valley. Under the blue-green canopy of the enchanted forest, as the shadows of the invasion crept deeper and deeper through the branches of the ancient trees, Queen Seralindra and the Claw Woman stood bent over the living maps of the forest, large sheets of leaves carved with threads of light, on which moving guiding fireflies showed in real time the location of the enemy. We do not have enough troops to face them in the open field, said Queen Seralindra, with a controlled sadness in her voice. But the forest is our ally. And the spiders? Asked the Claw Woman. Do you think they will respond? They have already answered. In a dark recess of the enchanted forest, there lived a giant spider, with 8 eyes that shone like pearls of night and legs that touched branches dozens of steps away. His name was Elzar, and legend said that he had once been the guardian of the balance between night and day. At the queen's call, Elzar descended from the silent grove and spoke thus. My web is woven only for what is right. And now I feel in the air that the forest is wounded. We will weave, we will restrain evil, at least for a while. With a swing of antennae and a silent call, Elzar gathered around him hundreds of spiders from all corners of the forest, a cloud of silky legs, translucent eyes and silver threads. Under his guidance, they began to weave above the murmuring river valley, that flowed deep and clear among the rocks and willows, whispering old tales to those who had ears to listen. The webs were stretched between trunks, branches, and stones, some invisible even in daylight. The threads were hardened with enchanted dew, and the knots had been tied with essence of evening leaf, which made them almost indestructible to the creatures of the grimy world. That grey morning Varlok descended with his army into the Murmur River Valley. He walked confidently on the damp earth, his thoughts already turned to the Queen's palace. The giant ants, the iron beetles, his cursed spiders, and the poisonous wasps swarmed around him. Here, between these rocks, is the shortest way, he said. Cut down the trees. Climb the slopes. No one can stop us. But as his army entered the middle of the valley, a signal of light was fired by Clinter from a watch leaf. Then Ilzar, from a hidden corner of the rocks, uttered an incantation in the language of the spiders, from the trees, from the stones, from above and below. A sea of webs, pearly white, heavy as winter air and sharp as silk razors, came loose. Hundreds of webs fell over Varlok's army like a curtain of oblivion. What is this? Varlok roared, trying to tear away the threads that had bound his feet to the ground. Ants were squirming, trying to break free. Wasps were buzzing, trapped with their wings closed in silken cocoons. Grimy spiders tried to cut the web, but the essence of evening leaf made it impenetrable to their dark shells. Varlok felt threads coiling over his eyes, over his mandibles, over his chitinous chest. This is not a fight. It's a curse. Claw woman. You are behind this mess, he shouted angrily, but the web enveloped him more and more. In a corner of the forest, from a branch, Claw woman watched everything. This is only the beginning, she whispered. Now we know we can slow it down. The next step is the fire of truth. Chapter 24. Counterattack from Sky and Shadow. After the web trap in the Murmur River Valley had managed to temporarily halt the advance of the army from the Gromy land, the Claw woman emerged from her leafy shelter and turned to Clinter, the royal beetle. It's time, she said. Now we must strike. Without mercy. The forest gives us weapons. Already soaring above the trees were huge flocks of birds of prey, as well as weaver birds, each with strong wings and sharp beaks. Since morning, dozens of birds had carried in their claws small jugs filled with hot rubber, melted in the furnaces of the forest, forged from the black sap of the living tree, the oldest tree in the heart of the forest. This rubber, guarded and used only in times of need, clung to the enemy's shell as a promise of agony. The transport was carried out with skill in woven bags made of thousands of leaves tied together by the weaver birds, who had worked day and night to prepare the weapons of the sky. On the ground, next to the Claw woman, 100 giant lizards with their tongues slithered poisonous. They spat from a distance and struck silently, melting the legs of the grimy insects. Along the bushes and among the tall trees, the scout chameleons moved, invisible, slipping close to the enemy. Ranks and marking their targets with blue stripes that sparkled in the darkness. Now, shouted the Claw woman, and the air was filled with a buzz of wings and a cloud of soft fire. The birds began to throw their webs of red-hot rubber over the ranks of the evil army. When they touched the insect shells, they broke with a dull pop, and the rubber spread, burning and sticking to the black chitin. Burn them. For the forest. The Claw woman's voice was heard among the crackling of branches and the roar of insects enveloped in viscous fire. Frightening cries echoed from the depths of the grimy army. Giant beetles rolled on the ground, blind frogs jumped in circles and wasps lost their flight, crashing into corners where they awaited the final bite of the blue lizards. From the chaos of the battle, however, a figure staggered forward. It was Vocker, the nightmare spider, left with a deep wound on one leg and half of his eyes burned by the hot web. With the last of his strength, he escaped the scorching fire and moved away, leaving behind almost half of the evil army, lost in the blaze of the forest. Deep in the Gromy land, in a cave of white bones and dead roots, Queen Narcola sat seated on her throne of petrified blood. Her eyes were closed, but she saw everything, through the eyes of the spy insects that had been planted in the forest leaf. It hurts me, she whispered. It hurts me when I feel myself dying. It hurts me when I see our forest defeated. Beside her, the Dark King raises his black bone, but Narcola raises a thin hand. No, not yet. Vocker is alive. He's not defeated. He can still fulfill our will. In a dark tree bark, Narcola uttered a whispered curse, and her words reached Vocker like a voice from the depths. Vocker, my sons and daughters perish, but you are still alive. Do not stop. Do not turn back. Advance towards Queen Saralindra's palace. Do not attack it. Not yet. Observe it. Crush it from the shadows. Volker, his limbs trembling, raised his forehead and muttered, "So be it, my queen. The palace will fall." And so began the shadow of a new battle, but the enchanted forest had not spoken its last word. Chapter 25. The Living Tunnel in the Middle Forest. After the first great victory over the army of the Gromy Land, the enchanted forest had only breathed for a moment. The Claw Woman, alongside the giant lizards, chameleons, birds and frogs, stood at the edge of the battlefield, looking north, where the thick shadows announced that thousands of other evil insects were approaching. "It is not over yet," she said in a low voice, that time, in the heart of the enchanted forest, around the wise tree, an ancient tree with its trunk inlaid with living symbols that sparkled in the moonlight. Princess Linyara spoke in whispers to the roots. "The forest has a body, it has a mind, it has a will, and now it must defend itself." The wise tree, known as Thalvarin, shook its thick, heavy branches. Its roots vibrated deep in the earth. "The vines are ready, I have awakened the middle trees. The tunnel will come to life, by spell and summoning." Long, dark green, living vines with sharp spear-like tips emerged from the thick trunks of the middle trees. They grew in just a few moments, twisting into each other like giant snakes and creating a long, dark tunnel, whose walls were made of stems, leaves, and roots. The sky was completely covered, and the only way forward was through this narrow, organic, moving corridor.At. The head of the second column of the army, Varlok, the giant beetle, eyed this tunnel suspiciously. The terrain had become slippery, and the sounds were muffled. No birds, no wind. "What is this?" he muttered, shaking his jaws. "A trap? Or a weakness? Let's go," a nearby grasshopper bellowed. "We can't stay here." And so, thousands of insects crept into the moving tunnel, their footsteps echoing on the damp earth, while the vines vibrated from the tunnel walls. When part of the army's body was already trapped inside, Thalvarin gave the signal. "Now," the old tree murmured. "Now, Linyara." The princess spoke the ancient words, and the vines began to move. They tightened, twisted, knotted, narrowing the tunnel. Behind the army, the exit closed completely. The light had become only a faint strip, and before it was only darkness. "Squeeze us! Strangle us!" Screams were heard from within. The vines threw their sharp tips at the insects in the tunnel, stabbing them, pulling them into the living walls. Some vines opened into huge green mouths, swallowing the beetles whole. Those in the middle could no longer advance. Those at the back screamed, those at the front tried to break the barrier in front, but to no avail. The tunnel had become a living cage. Above, high in the trees, chameleons and weaver birds watched the scene and transmitted signals to the Claw Woman. "The tunnel has been activated." "Linyara did it," said a messenger bird, descending smoothly. The Claw Woman nodded. "She is a fighter. The child of the forest is ready for the throne." The royal beetle Clinter came to her side. "Varlok is trapped. Now we must make him feel fear." "Not fear," said the Claw Woman, "but despair." From the heart of the tunnel Varlok howled, his mandibles hitting the vine walls. His left eye was covered in green sap. He was breathing hard. The insects had begun to step on each other. The walls were moving. They were tightening. They were closing. The tunnel was not just a trap. It was a living being that ate, gathered, and defended its forest. And outside, the enchanted forest breathed with hope. Chapter 26. The Sap of Justice. The living tunnel of the middle forest was now a perfect trap. Thousands of insects from Tenebro's army struggled in the darkness, trapped between the moving organic walls, gathering and closing around them with an unstoppable force. But in the middle of that tunnel, where the tree trunks joined in a gate of weak light, Queen Seralindra appeared. Her body was covered in leaves of living gold, and her crown sparkled with the moonlight gathered in drops. She raised a hand, and the vines stopped moving. The silence that fell. Only the heavy breathing of the captive insects and the rustling of the leaves could be heard. "Tenebros," whispered the queen, but her voice carried throughout the tunnel, for it had been woven with the magic of the trees. She knew, as the Claw Woman had told her, that King Tenebros saw through the eyes of the spying insects. The black eyes of the locusts, the green eyes of the giant beetles, all carried a fragment of his consciousness. The queen stepped forward, among the trembling insects. "Tenebros, I know you hear me. I know you have seen the enchanted forest defend its life. But today I do not speak to you of death, I speak to you of betrayal. Of truth. The insects around her fell silent. Their jaws stopped chattering. Their wings stopped whirring. Everyone watched. The queen raised her arms, and from her fingers flowed thin threads of sap, shining like living light. The claw woman was your creation. Narcola, you used ancient spells, you corrupted the land, you drew beings into the light that should not have been awakened. You crafted a weapon for destruction to paused and the eyes of some beetles, the light of a greater consciousness shone. But what you do not know is that I saw your creation, I felt it ripening in the darkness of Gromi, and I sent a root of the forest into the womb of darkness. A single drop of our sap, the sap of justice, was put into her blood. The queen touched her chest, where the sap bathed her green heart. The claw woman no longer belongs to you. She carries the voice of the forest. She carries the will to right evil, to fight not for hatred, but for balance. You created a weapon, I transformed her into a free being. That moment, the claw woman, hidden in the shadow of the vines, opened her eyes. Her pale face in her palm was illuminated by a green tear that flowed from one of her emerald eyes. I know who I am, she said softly. And I am not afraid. The queen looked up, knowing that King Tenebros and Queen Narcola were listening, perhaps trembling with anger. You sent an army of insects, but we have birds, vines, living waters and light. You sent a being to kill, but she learned to protect. This is our power. The tunnel began to move again, the vines rustling like 1,000 green snakes. The forest does not fear you, said the queen, and the sky trembled. Send everything you have. The enchanted forest will face you. Then, Queen Seralindra disappeared in a beam of light, and the tunnel closed completely on Varlok's army. From the land of Gromi, in a hall of stone and shadows, King Tenebros and Queen Narcola remained silent. But their eyes burned with hatred and fear. Chapter 27. The Passage to the Luminous Sea. Varlok advanced through the narrow dark tunnel, with short swift movements, like a beetle between the walls of a giant shell. His long bony body was clad in a shell of wet black putty that creaked with every step. Two long antennae protruded from his back, sensitive to the vibrations of the surrounding vines, and his face was a moving nightmare. 2 mouths, one human, issuing orders and curses, and one below, with centipede fangs that clenched lustfully at every sound. His eyes were not 2, but an entire colony, a mosaic of small bulbous eyes, like those of a giant fly, blinking indiscriminately, seeing from all directions and in all shadows. Behind him, the remnants of Gromi's army, thousands of evil insects, crawled, flew, or rolled forward through the moving tunnel of living vines. They did not know where they were going, but they followed Varlok with hypnotic obedience. The tunnel had become increasingly humid. The vines thinned, the walls softened, and the air smelled of salt, seaweed, and the deep. Varlok did not know that the tunnel had not been carved by chance by Princess Linyara and the wise tree. It was a living trap, a gateway to the bright sea. With a last step, the vines opened like a giant mouth, and Varlok stepped into the void. The sound of the waves hit him for the first time. Then the light, a living blue light, pulsing from the depths of a silent and shining sea. His army fell one by one into the deep and clear waters, and the sky above disappeared. The tunnel closed with a soft rustle, like an eyelid closing forever. But it was no ordinary sea. The sea creatures of the bright sea had lived there for thousands of years. Ancient, translucent, and merciless, they had been summoned by the old blue dolphin and the animated depths of the marine world and the silence of the water. Dozens of mermaid whales, creatures with tails of liquid fire, began to swim in circles around the insects. Crystal octopuses, with tentacles that moved like rays of sharp light, embraced the giant beetles and pulled them towards the abyss. Eyed jellyfish, floating creatures that had eyes at the ends of their tentacles, sparkled and swallowed whole swarms of flies and black ants. Varlok fell into the water, and his shell began to swell. Unable to resist the pressure of the living sea, he struggled with all 4 articulated limbs, and the mouth of the centipede let out a sharp scream, heard only by the ears of the deep. But from the darkness, a colossus rose. Saruman, the ancient guardian of the luminous sea, a sea creature, with mother-of-pearl skin and a mane of water pure, whose eyes never blinked. Saruman spoke with the voice of all the sea currents. This is not the land of your hatred. Here the end begins, and with a single movement, He sent a blinding white whirlwind that swallowed tens, hundreds, thousands of insects. Varlok, caught between the waters and the light, tried to cling to a reef of living coral, but they opened and pulled him. End.By sunset, Tenebro's army had been devoured. Only a few insects, wounded and frightened, managed to escape, swimming chaotically towards the unknown shores of the enchanted forest. But King Tenebros had lost. More than an army, he had lost his fear. And the claw woman, his creation, was now the master of his destiny. Chapter 28. The Joy of the Forest and the Fall of Shadows. The morning sun fell gently over the enchanted forest, enveloping the treetops in a golden light. The flowers sang, the weaver birds flew in high circles, and the murmuring river swayed its waters with a new calm, unusual after the hard days of war. Through the forest glades, the green frogs with sticky tongues jumped happily, and the blue lizards danced, coiling their tails on the warm trunks of the trees. The messenger birds uttered the great news in cadenced trills. Varlok has been defeated. The Dark King has fallen into silence. In the heart of the forest, at the Root Palace, built among the intertwined branches of the oldest trees, Queen Seralindra held council with the Claw Woman, Princess Linyara, and the old royal beetle Clinta. The queen's smile was warm, but full of determination. The forest has been defended. The shadow has retreated. But all is not over yet. The Claw Woman, with her immense palm, in which her female face now seemed gentler, bent her fingers in gratitude. Green eyes in the palm shone under the rays of the sun. But Varlok did not perish. We have him prisoner in a cage of light woven from living vines and glassy spiderweb. Varlok lay wounded and silent. His body, once covered in glossy black putty, was now cracked and opaque. His antennae hung broken, and his human mouth uttered only low moans. He had been captured by sea creatures and brought to shore by the blue dolphin, then imprisoned deep, under the roots of an ancient tree, in the forest dungeon called the Forgotten Root. There, in the darkness, in a hole with walls of glowing moss, already lay the traitor Zelka, the green forest serpent, who lay coiled and silent, avoiding everyone's gaze. When Varlok was thrown into prison, Zelka hissed weakly. "And you? You fell?" Varlok did not answer. Only his fly-like eyes closed, one by one, leaving only a shadow of smoldering anger. That day, Queen Seralindra declared a holiday. All the inhabitants of the enchanted forest gathered in the high glade. Songs were sung in the language of flowers, spiders painted their webs in bright colors, and birds released sparks in whirling flights. Princess Linyara, dressed in living leaves and flowers growing in her hair, spoke to everyone. "Let us not forget, the forest is not just a home, it is a soul, it is a connection, it is life. And today, we defended it together." The Claw Woman stood on the edge of the gathering, watching in silence. The children of the trees looked at her with admiration, but also with a shiver. The creation of shadows had become the defender of light. And she knew it. The whole forest was not the end of the road, but only the beginning. The Gromy Land. The Dark King sat on his throne of bone and smoke. Alone. Silent. Weakened. Queen Narcola no longer spoke orders. She spun in circles, talking to the shadows. And in the fabric of reality, a crack began to widen. Chapter 29. The Root of Light. 7 days and 7 nights had passed since the enchanted forest had won the battle with darkness. But in Queen Seralindra's heart there was not only joy, but also a silent restlessness, like a cold breeze on a clear day. Dawn on the 8th day, the queen called the Claw Woman to the Glade of Mirrors, the place where all the memories of the forest were kept in clear lakes. Their Princess Linyara also arrived, her forehead illuminated by sap of the wisdom received from the wise tree. The queen spoke. In a low voice, like a falling leaf. "You both know that evil never dies completely, it hides, takes root in other realms, in other hearts." The Claw Woman tilted her bizarre body slightly. Her long fingers clenched and unclenched slowly, and the face in the palm looked at the mirror of water. "But good never dies, Queen, as long as there is something to defend, I will fight." "Me too," said Linyara, lightly touching the bark of an old tree. "I will learn to lead, not only with my heart, but with the courage of those who fought alongside me." The queen smiled. Then, she stretched out her hands and spoke an ancient word. That moment, the eastern sky opened like a flower. From the light descended a shower of shining seeds, which settled on the forest floor. Where they touched the earth, golden flowers grew, new trees, new lives. This is the legacy of the forest, a world that is reborn from battle, but lives through forgiveness and vigilance. In the dungeon of the forgotten root, Varlok and Zelker stood in darkness. But their walls were not just stone and moss, they were woven from the dreams of the forest. There, shadows could no longer hide. There, lies melted. Claw woman, whispered Varlok, in a moment of lucidity, I did not defeat you, because you were no longer ours. And he was silent. On the last day of the celebration, all the inhabitants of the enchanted forest gathered again. Above, the birds painted the sky. On the ground, the lizards, frogs, grasshoppers and all the creatures of the queen's army received their honor. Even the royal beetle Clinter stood on his 6 legs and said, The forest has no soldiers, it has beings who love life. And that is why it does not lose. The claw woman, now changed, with her palms smooth and her green eyes shining like 2 living emeralds, turned to the people. I was created from darkness, but now I am part of the light. As long as the forest lives, I will watch. The last leaf of autumn fell slowly, and in that silence, the enchanted forest breathed deeply, with all its roots, all its branches, all its souls. And so the story of the claw woman ended, or maybe it is just beginning. Epilogue. The enchanted forest no longer trembled. The wind resumed its song among the wise leaves, and the springs whispered stories again to the flowers hidden under the moss. The sky was clear, and the silence was not a dead one, but a living, deep one, full of the breath of those who had survived and hoped. The claw woman stood at the edge of the forest, where the trees ended and the horizon began. From her body, always strange, neither human being nor creature from a nightmare, a rare peace now emanated. 6 fingers and a face on the back of her hand, but a heart that beat for something more than revenge, for justice and balance. Varlok had been defeated. The treacherous serpent had been imprisoned, and the Dark King, weakened and alone, had disappeared into the catacombs of his land, where shadows weep and bite each other. Queen Narcola could no longer look through the eyes. The spy insects had all been scattered by the light. Princess Linyara, now wielder of the green sword given by the wise tree, had learned to listen, not just command. She looked to the future with the confidence of a leader born not of blood but of deeds. The humble and devoted royal beetle Clinter had been elevated to the rank of Great Warden of the Edge, the one who would guard the forest's border against any future darkness. And the claw woman? She asked for no throne, no reward. She returned to the depths of the forest, where the silence is thick and the shadows are friendly. She asked only one thing of Queen Seralindra, to plant a new tree, in the center of a quiet clearing. There she stuck her 6 fingers into the ground and spoke, in a voice that came from the palm of her face. From my claw shall spring not fear, but root. Not a blade, but a shadow that protects. And so, the claw woman became a legend. Some say they still see her on the nights when the forest breathes deeply, walking on 2 fingers among the trees, guarding the borders of the world from the darkness that still lurks. For she was born of fear, but she chose to become hope.